you get stuck with me twice today, so we'll make it through, right? Go to 2 Kings chapter 5. We're doing a wonderful story, one of the favorites, if you have favorites. Do you have favorites in the Bible? Well, we have some that are just standout stories. It just kind of mark the Bible of special information that God would, only God could supply something like this. And it's a story of Naaman's leprosy in 2 Kings chapter 5. I want to just read down through a few verses and then we'll get into more of that through today. But let's read just a few verses of this chapter and then we'll do more of it as we go along. Now Naaman, captain of the host of the king of Syria, was a great man with his master and honorable, because by him the Lord had given deliverance unto Syria. He was also a mighty man in valor, but he was a leper. And the Syrians had gone out by companies and had brought away captive out of the land of Israel a little maid, and she waited on Naaman's wife. She said unto her mistress, Would God my Lord were with the prophet that is in Samaria, for he would recover him of his leprosy. And one went in and told his Lord, saying, Thus and thus said the maid that is of the land of Israel. The king of Syria said, Go, and I will send a letter unto the king of Israel. And he departed, took with him 10 talents of silver, 6,000 pieces of gold, and 10 changes of raiment. And he brought the letter to the king of Israel, saying, Now when this letter is come unto thee, behold, I have therewith sent Naaman my servant to thee, that thou mayest recover him of his leprosy. What a great story, but what a great opportunity for us to learn something of God's dealings with the nation of Israel in a very profound way. You remember in our study, we've looked at some of the work of Elijah and Elisha in this particular lesson series. And the last studies we've done, we found about the great woman of Shunem and her husband that built a room for Elisha. We found out about God rewarding their kindness by giving them a son. Remember that? And then I think you heard the story as well. He suddenly died. I've always thought that was probably a heat stroke or something of that nature, but nevertheless, he died. She went to Carmel. She got the prophet Elisha. He brought her son back to life. I always thought when I read that, I said, no, Elisha didn't do it. God did it, right? Through Elisha, but he used Elisha in a very special way. What a proving of God's work through men, the way that he worked through the prophets. Elisha had said there would be a 7-year famine and talked about that, and he advised her with her household to go to another country during the famine. Have y'all studied that yet? That's 2 Kings chapter 8. I thought we haven't studied that yet. Anyway, I don't think we have. In the famine, Elisha would do 2 miracles to help the servants of God, and think that's coming. The famine. The woman of Shunem returned to Israel to find all her property taken, and then she appealed to the king, and the king made sure her property was restored. God was at work through foreign nations. It's an amazing thing to think of, how God worked through the foreign nations surrounding Israel and taking care of them. Then he works through this widow, and now he works through this woman of Shunem and her husband. And he uses different people in remarkable ways. There were some verses that you kind of covered in some way through these early lessons, lessons 1 through 8. Matthew 6:34, Take therefore no thought for the morrow shall take thought of the things of itself. Sufficient unto the day is the evil thereof. Remember that in Proverbs? Boast not thyself of tomorrow. There's some things we just don't worry about tomorrow. Take care of today, right? And God proved that through the prophets and through many in Israel over and over again. There was this verse that I saw that was kind of covered, but godliness with contentment is great gain. Someone asks, why do we suffer? Why do we get in situations? Well, sometimes God is trying to create godliness. And how do you create godliness? Well, sometimes it's the trial of your faith that brings godliness. Sometimes He puts us into situations where we have to be content with very, very little, or circumstances a bit beyond our control. We'd say, I'd rather not, but God says, no, that's going to be for your good and my glory. There's some things that He does. Today I want you to remember this verse that goes along with today's lesson, lesson 9. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, lean not unto thine own understanding. Anybody memorize that verse? Sure you have. There you go. Verse number 6 goes so hand in hand. You kind of got to do them both, don't you? But this is an important verse as you're thinking about this story of Naaman, what happens with him, to trust in the Lord. It begins with the very fact that God is going to use Syria to take over Israel, to actually go into battle, and will bring them into a position of subservience. I mean, Israel will become slaves to Syria, the majority. Even though there's mention of the king of Israel is still going to be under the authority of Syria. That was a common practice. They'd leave the kings or the authority line in place, but you better answer to the king of Syria or else you're in big trouble. Many a time a king would show himself just a little bit sideways with the reigning authority. They'd lose their life and their families' lives. So there's a lot that played here. But Israel had come again to the place where their disobedience had brought God's judgment, and God was going to work in a very powerful way in the nation of Israel. And as He begins to do that, He's going to take and use this particular story for a lot of lessons for us. I first noticed in verse number 1 the things about Naaman, the man that God uses in this story. Naaman, he is called honorable. He's called someone that's great man with his master. That's a pretty amazing thing. So the king of Syria obviously put a lot of blessings or a lot of weight behind Naaman and really thought of him in a great way. And then do you notice in verse number 1 when you read it, the Lord had given deliverance? Did you notice that? When we talk about trusting in the Lord, do you ever think about trusting in the Lord and saying, okay, Lord, use my enemies against me? No, we don't think that way. We say, rather not. But sometimes God is thinking, are you going to trust me in all the circumstances, in every case? So I believe there was this one servant girl we're going to hear about in a few minutes and think about her story, but I think there was many in Israel that were needing some lessons from the Lord. That's why God put this there. The Lord had given deliverance. He was going to say, Israel, are you going to trust me during this time? So Naaman was called a mighty man in valor, and so he was apparently a very good soldier, quite capable, fully trusted by the king, leading the host of the king. The host there is the armies. That would be the armies that he's leading. So apparently he was good at his job, but he had leprosy. I tried to say, when did he get the leprosy? Was it just right here at this moment he got leprosy, or had he been a leper for a long time? Apparently he had been a leper for a time. And that apparently too, leprosy is something that at this particular time was such a horrendous disease. It was often you were the outcast. You received that disease and you were put in some kind of, we would say, an institution today. But for them, you would just be put on the outside of the city and you're looking in. You weren't allowed to associate, weren't allowed to be around them. But apparently his leprosy was in some way allowable to be in contact with the king. So it could have been in one hand, it could have been in part of his body, could have been part of his head. They say a lot of your extremities, your fingers, your ears, your toes, are early affected by the disease. Was it early in the disease? Well, I don't know, but it was bad enough. God said, let me mention he was a leper. And then the rest of the chapter, he uses that little disease, okay, big disease, in Naaman's life, and he says, I'm going to teach all of you something. Every single one of them. The king of Syria, the king of Israel, Naaman, the little maid, all the servants surrounding Naaman are going to learn something. Then he's going to take Israel and Elisha, and he's going to say, I got a lesson for you guys too. He even takes Elisha and brings him right to the point. And then there's the old servant of Elisha, Gehazi. Yep, he comes into the story as well. So you got a lot of characters learning what? To trust in the Lord. All right? When you go to verse number 2, the Syrians had gone out by companies and had brought away captive out of the land of Israel a little maid. So this little maid could have been from anywhere throughout Israel. Could have come from Galilee. She could have come from Jerusalem. She could have come from Judea, some other part of Israel. But she was a part of one of these raids that had taken place by Syria. They'd gone in, captured cities, and they took slaves. This was a common practice. This was one of the ways that they would bring an enemy into submission. Take the women and the children, slaves. The men would be put into servitude, and usually it was in a very, very, very hardship type way. Some of them would even be slaughtered and killed because of their association with the armies or something else. So however they could bring these people into submission, that's what Syria did. And as this little maid is there, we are told what her particular service was. She waited on Naaman's wife. Now, what a convenient story. What a convenient little situation. But God knew this, and God said, I'm going to use this little maid. This little maid could have been from an adolescent to a young adult. We're not quite sure of the age. I'm going to assume by some of the thinking that I have toward it that she might have been somewhere in her teen years, maybe late teen years. I'm not sure. But by the fact it says little maid, the ones that did anything with this word maid said adolescent to young adult. Could have been the age frame that could have been there. But I am amazed at this, that she was willing to speak up, aren't you? I don't know if she said this to Naaman's wife, but she said unto her mistress, so that would be Naaman's wife is what I understand. But all of the servants around Naaman's wife are listening, especially one of them that has contact with the king of Syria. So as they're listening, she speaks up. Would God, my Lord, were with the prophet that is in Samaria. Okay? Samaria. We've heard a lot about that. Even in Jesus' days, you hear about Samaria, right? And the Samaritans. Well, here's this little maid is from probably even this territory. She obviously knew about Elisha, where he lived, the conditions, the situation, and she even had such great confidence in what God had used him for that she could say he would recover him of his leprosy. That's a lot of confidence. It's a lot of faith. Don't you agree? I admire that of her. I think that's been a subject of many preachers using the story of the little maid to preach great stories of great sermons of faith, and it ought to be. God put it in his book for just that reason. Her testimony had to be more than just this statement. Would God, my Lord, were with the prophet. I think her testimony went beyond that. She was probably a kind, sweet, gentle servant of God first. But here's something I do believe. She knew her God. This wasn't something which she was saying, you'll find out about Elisha's God. You'll find out about the ability of Elisha's God. No, she was saying her God. She spoke of her God. It was personal with her. She had a relationship with God, but she did have a personal idea, you know, this God we know has great ability. She has maybe seen it, experienced it in some way, so she is being led to be in this position by God, and she is maintaining such a cheerful, pleasant attitude. I don't believe she was stubborn or self-willed. Yeah, I'm pausing for all of our benefit. She was not stubborn or self-willed. Even in a circumstance, she said, I'd rather not. I'd rather not be a slave. I'd rather not be a servant to Naaman's wife. The man that has come in and taken our city, made us captives, and now I'm having to serve his wife. She could have been just as angry and upset and bitter. She was not. Apparently, by the expression of the way that she waited on Naaman's wife, the way that she said, would God my Lord were with the prophet. She had a spirit and a heart of submission and a will that says, I'm trusting God. So, someone, verse 4, went in and told his Lord, saying, Thus and thus saith the maid that is of the land of Israel. So this little maid is of the land of Israel. So that could have been anywhere, the land of Samaria, Galilee, Jerusalem, Judea, somewhere in that territory. She could have been part of all of that. But at least we know she's a Jew. And the king of Syria said, so this one went in and told his Lord. This wasn't, I sometimes had missed that, and I thought, well, this was going to talk to Naaman. No, he's going to talk to the king of Syria. This one that's heard this comment, that's why I'm saying, Naaman's wife was present when this little maid said this thing, but there was other servants, and one of the servants of the king of Syria was present, and he took the news to the king of Syria. Well, if somebody's going to get something done in Syria, why wouldn't it be the king? And God directed that so that he would go to the king, and the king says, Go, and I will send a letter unto the king of Israel. He knew what to do. This king of Syria knew exactly what to do. It says then he took gifts. He took 10 talents of silver, 6,000 pieces of gold, 10 changes of raiment. That was going to make somebody real wealthy. Could you imagine the king of Israel seeing this as he is probably in Jerusalem, and he knows Syria from the north has taken charge of the country, and now he sees this entourage coming with all of these goods, and he's thinking, oh my goodness, what's going on? He has no clue what is taking place, but this person that is leading this group, all of a sudden he recognizes and says, wait just a minute, I know this man. That's Naaman. That's the captain of the king of Syria. Because you see, he is being sent by the king of Syria with his other servants, with all of these goods. And as Naaman's leading this, he thinks, uh-oh, we're in trouble. What have we done now? What is going to take place? Well, when this king began to understand what was taking place, it says he brought the letter to the king of Israel, saying, Now when this letter is come unto thee, behold, I have therewith sent Naaman, my servant, to thee, that thou mayest recover him of his leprosy. Have you ever thought that was kind of a funny statement? Who's going to recover Naaman of leprosy? Well, listen, in Scripture, leprosy has been noted to only be cured by God, the God of the Bible, the God that created us. He's the one that cures of leprosy. So there's no cure outside of God. There was no booster shot. There was no kind of, anything that they could take, no antibiotics at that particular time. They might have had something that would have eased some of the pain or taken care of some of the swelling. different herbs and different herbal things, but they had no cure but God. Now, as this is taking place, don't forget the testimony of the little maid, God's prophet, God's man. He would recover him of his leprosy. Where are they going? To the king of Israel. So they're not there yet. When they go to the king of Israel, they're not to where this little maid said they should go. The king of Syria is simply acting off of his own urges of thinking, well, I don't know where this prophet is at or who this guy is. I'll just let the king of Israel handle it. And he better handle it. Kind of idea the king of Syria had. Well, it scared the king of Israel to death. Can you imagine? When the king of Israel read the letter, he rent his clothes. Verse 7. And then he made an important statement. Am I God? Am I God to kill and make alive? Well, I'm glad he was humble enough and wise enough to say, you know what, I can't do it. That's good. That this man doth send unto me to recover a man of his leprosy? Wherefore consider, I pray you, and see how he seeketh a quarrel against me. Okay. Naaman, the captain of the king of Syria, the one who has been in charge of the armies, the host of the king of Syria. Go ahead, give him an answer. Naaman's ready. And the king of Israel said, oh goodness, whatever answer I give him is going to be wrong, and he's going to slaughter every one of us. We're done. He is scared to death. Wouldn't you be? Be kind of thinking of this. How are you going to trust the Lord with this circumstance? Well, that's exactly what God is trying to test. Is the king of Israel going to trust him through this? Is the people of Israel going to trust God through this? So, as this is answered, it was so when Elisha, the man of God, had heard that the king of Israel had rent his clothes. And I always said, how did he hear about it? Someone was there. Just like it happened with Naaman and the king of Syria. Someone was there watching as the king just started ripping his clothes. And that was a sign of humility and a sign of repentance, as well as a sign for him. He was humbling himself in the sight of God, saying, God, I've got to have help here. I can't do this. I'm helpless. And so as he does this, the news reaches Elisha that this had happened with the king. And Elisha says, wherefore hast thou rent thy clothes? Let him come now to me, and he shall know that there is a prophet in Israel. Chapter 5, verse number 8, you ought to underline that phrase, that he shall know. He shall know that there is a prophet in Israel. Any good prophet of God is not going to be communicating about himself, but about God. He's either a messenger of God with a message, or he's a foreteller of the future. One of the two things that the prophet could be. But he's never going to have a message about himself. So when he sent this message, which I believe it was just that, a message, to the king of Israel, he was noting here that I am going to prove God to you. And that's an important part of this whole story. Who are you trusting in circumstances are beyond your control? When you receive that phone call you were not expecting, when you have those kind of messages that something is up. Have you ever had that sense in your heart and mind? Something's wrong. And then you get a phone call, or you get some kind of letter, or you get some kind of information that says, yeah, there is a problem. Well, what do you do with that? I think Elisha has had enough time. He's prayed about it. But I think the king of Israel is praying about it. That's another thing about renting his clothes. It's saying, I'm going to spend a very specific time with God. He's taken his kingly robes off and he said, I am not capable of handling this situation. I need God. That's a complete humility or a complete humbling that has taken place. Now, the king of Israel, of course, is noted that he is going to do just that, to go see the prophet Elisha. So Naaman came with his horses and with his chariot and stood at the door of the house of Elisha. Notice that. Naaman came with his horses and with his chariot. His chariot was driven by probably either 2 or 4 horses. It could have been a multiplicity of horses and probably a very powerful team. But I think he had other chariots, not just the one. It was his chariot, but he probably had others with him, as well as all of the supplies that the king of Syria has sent to the king of Israel. They're following him, and he's going, oh my goodness. No, Elisha is completely satisfied with God's ability. So Elisha sent a messenger. That's the next important point, verse 10. Elisha sent a messenger. Now that's going to become important in the story. You remember it. It's going to be an important part. And Elisha, through this messenger, says, here's the message. Tell Naaman, go and wash in Jordan 7 times. Now, if you're standing and looking at a map, and you're looking at Jerusalem, you go right with your hand right above it. It's about 35 miles, would be Shechem, be the territory of Samaria. And if you go with your right hand over, you're going to find the river Jordan. It's not that far, but by horseback or by chariot, it might have taken less than a day. But at any rate, this would not be in Syria. This would be in Israel. So, what's going to happen? Thy flesh shall come again to thee, and thou shalt be clean. Isn't that what he's there for? What a response gets taken place, but there is a lot to come through Elisha by this action. Elisha did not go himself. He sent a messenger. Well, I thought that's the part of the prophet. He's the messenger. He's supposed to deliver the message. Well, he does, but he knows something about Naaman. God has supplied him with the information and says, don't go, Elisha, send a messenger. I have a reason. Okay, God's put you in a place right now in your life and you say, I don't know what's going on, don't know what is about to take place, but God just says, trust me. Trust me. The little maid is sitting back in Syria and she's wondering what's happened to Naaman. What's happened to that? This could have taken weeks if this would have taken place. The time that he's traveled down there, now he's seen this and seen the king of Israel. Now he's gone over to see Elisha. All of this could have taken some period of time. She's wondering, what has God done? Well, God's doing exactly what he promised. He has the ability and he has given the announcement, thou shalt be clean. Nobody can deny the fact that the prophet had confidence that this was going to be the result. The prophet had confidence in this result. 10:15. We don't have anyone ringing the bell, so Miss Lisa's not ringing it. I know we're about done. Let's do 2 more verses and we'll finish. But Naaman was wroth. That's the next thing that you have to underline. We'll come back to the Jordan and what happens there, but he will surely come. He was wroth, and he said, behold, I thought he will surely come out to me. I thought, this was Naaman, I thought he would come out. Who? The prophet. You see, he's slighted by the prophet. That's going to be one thing that makes him mad. And then he says, I thought he would call on the name of the Lord as God, strike his hand over the place. Now, this is another reason I think it was not a leprosy over his whole body. It could have been his ears. It could have been his nose. It could have been an extremity, part of his legs. Some place is affected by this leprosy. I don't think it's his hands, actually, because he's captain of the army, so I think he's probably pretty good at handling a sword, bow and arrow, whatever. But the fact of the matter is, he is in a position where he said, are not Abana and Apharpar rivers of Damascus better than all the waters of Israel? See, he's been slighted by the prophet because the prophet didn't deliver the message personally. Now he's slighted of his country. My country is better than your country. our rivers are better than your rivers. I agree with him. The Jordan River is not that particularly lavish and something you go, wow, that's an amazing river. You kind of go, that's Jordan River? Now, you can't leap across it, surely, because it's probably half of this, maybe a little bit more than this building, but it's not that far. From one bank to the other bank where we were at, where I got baptized, was not that far. But I tell you this, water was cold that day, and it was dirty. And it's not particularly inviting. Come on in, guys. Not particularly inviting. But nevertheless, he is thinking, my country is being slighted. So it's really tugged at his heart, and he's just at a place of total pride. Proverbs 13:10. Only by pride cometh contention. It's a great verse. It's something you ought to just grapple with and get settled in your heart. This is a lot of what takes place in the hearts of mankind today. Only by pride cometh contention, but with the well-advised is wisdom. The only thing that he can see is that he's been slighted by the prophet. He's been slighted in his country. And he's still got his leprosy. So the idea that he's going to get delivered of his leprosy in some way is just something that he kind of goes, yeah, sure, right. This is really going to happen. So he's risen up into a point where he's not receiving the message, and God's got him right where he wants him. Naaman needed to be at this place because he's going to find out, are you going to trust? But it is going to take an extra step for Naaman. I don't believe Naaman would quite understand this idea because he's not of the nation of Israel. He's not aware of Elisha and his God and all the things. Not necessarily, though the Syrians knew a lot about the Jews. So there's a lot of things to take place in Naaman's heart that's going to bring him to a place of trust. The rest of this story that we start going from here in, and we start actually hearing of the reaction that takes place with Naaman, only God could do that. To bring Naaman, to bring Elisha, to bring this entourage to this place where God is going to show his ability, says, yeah, I'm going to kind of show off a little bit. But what he's actually going to do, he's going to break some hearts. He's going to just totally break the heart. A broken and contrite heart God will not despise. Before he can get the heart under control, the trust has to be there. But sometimes you have to break the heart to get the trust. God is going to bring Naaman to a point where he can do just that. And we'll have to finish that message next time, all right? God bless you.